Well, the first time I encountered death, I was 23 years old and in bed with a prostitute. Yeah, that got your attention, didn't it? Well, I was 23 years old and I was living in New York. I was what they called a walking lady, which is the actor who takes the roles too large for the chorus and too small for the leads. Now, this was at the Park Theater. And it was excellent training too. Everything was repertory in those days. And during my 3 years as a walking lady, I performed over 120 different roles. But what does this have to do with a prostitute? Well, I'm getting to it. The Park Theater was managed by one Stephen Price, and it's an understatement to say that Mr. Price and I did not get along. You see, Mr. Price resented any actor who was more handsome than himself. He saw it as his personal mission in life to drive me out of the company, and in February of 1839, it looked as if he just might succeed. The Park Theater was going to produce Oliver Twist, and there's a part of a prostitute in the play, Nancy Sykes. Well, in my day, no actress with any kind of reputation would touch a role like that, and Stephen Price knew it. So naturally, he assigned it to me. If I took the part, I would be professionally ruined, and if I refused, I would be fired. Yes, Mr. Price finally had me exactly where he wanted me. And to tell you the truth, I considered quitting. I mean, it was quite an insult to be cast as a prostitute. And of course, he had done it in front of the whole company. But I have seen too many talented women lose out to temperament in this game, and I was determined not to be outmaneuvered. If there was a way to play Nancy Sykes without damaging my reputation, I was going to find it. And I was equally determined to see Stephen Price hoist on his own tiny petard. So I accepted the part graciously. And then I took myself down to 5 Points. Now that's the area just east of Broadway, the worst slum in New York. And I rented myself a room at Mother Hennessy's, which was the cheapest and dirtiest rooming house I could find. Now that was where the streetwalkers and the drunks stayed when they could afford a roof for the night. And it was there at Mother Hennessy's that I began to study the role of Nancy Sykes. During the day, I went out on the street and I watched the old women pick through the garbage, and I watched the young women pick through the old men. I watched their hands, their hips, their elbows, their mouths, their teeth, their eyebrows. I watched them flirt. I watched them joke. I watched them steal. I watched the things that no one else was watching. And at night, I went to the saloons and I studied the women there. And sometimes the women studied me. On the third night, a young prostitute came into the bar. She was very sick, shaking all over, and she asked for water. They gave her a glass of whiskey and she got sick all over the floor. Now, the men thought this was funny. I went to help her, and it turned out she didn't have any place to stay for the night. So I took her up to my room at Mother Hennessy's. I undressed her, and I put her in bed. And then she died. That's it. That's the story. No last words, no touching prayers, no anxious faces hovering over the bed, no final embrace. A convulsion, and she died. That was it. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. What did I do? Well, I took her clothes. Of course I took her clothes. I had a show to open and they fit me. And then I went back to the Park Theater and I gave them Nancy Sykes. Oh, yes, I gave them Nancy Sykes. Not the whore with the heart of gold, not the feisty little spitfire from the wrong side of town. Oh, no, I gave them a prostitute the likes of which they had never seen on a New York stage, even though they passed a dozen girls just like her on the way to the theater, even though half the men would go home with one of these girls on their arm. But I gave them a prostitute they could see, not just look at, but really see. I gave them a prostitute that made them weep the tears that no one shed that night at Mother Hennessy's. And weep they did. You see, real life is too painful for most people. Well, that's why they come to the theater.
Whoa.